let's continue from where we left off. Now, I just want to back up a little bit so I can give context to the Wahhabi's next statement. So, this was said to the Wahhabi when he was asking about the hadith of nuzul, the hadith of descent. So it was said to him, if Allah descends to the lowest sky, that would mean that all the higher skies and paradise and the kursi and the arsh would be above him, and he would be below them. I've already given you the hadith that nothing is above Allah and nothing is below him. This hadith, he didn't comment on it. He didn't acknowledge it. Maybe he's just learning though. Maybe he's asking so he can know, so he doesn't have a comment. Doesn't look like it though. But not just that. Besides contradicting the hadith, believing that Allah is below whatever he passed on his way down would mean that Allah has a top and a bottom. Notice there, whatever he passed on his way down. That's comparing God to the creations. This would mean that Allah has a top and a bottom, which would mean that he has a left and a right and a front and a behind. In other words, he would be a body. Then, according to this claim, he either descended head first or foot first, especially since those who call themselves Salafis say that he has a literal face and a literal foot. Or, according to this claim, he descended face down like a belly flop, or backwards with his front towards the sky and his back towards the earth. And all of that is impossible. That's like, how does the diver, the deep sea diver, how does he go out of the boat? Doesn't he sit and then he falls down back first? So if any of that were possible, then even a cannonball dive would be possible. And just shutting your mind off from that doesn't save you from it or disprove it. This statement here, and just shutting your mind off from it doesn't save you from it or disprove it, that's thwarting a statement that the Wahhabi might say. Like, the Wahhabi might say, you can't go there. He might say, after hearing these arguments, this is you using your limited human mind. That's like what a Christian would say. When you say to the Christian, how could God be his own father and his own son? How could the son be his own father? How could the father be his own son? They would say, you are using your limited human mind. So before the Wahhabi gets a chance to say that Sunni said to him, just shutting your mind off from that doesn't save you from it or disprove it. Because ignoring the problem doesn't make it go away. Now sometimes you might do that with someone you talk to. You might cut him off at the head and anticipate that he's going to say something. So you would close that before he even opens it. Yani, you would block him there before he gets there. You put the roadblock there before he gets there. But doesn't mean he's still not going to climb over that roadblock and do it anyway and say what you tried to stop him from saying anyway. So if he does that, then you'll just have to repeat yourself. And you'd say, but like I said to you already, shutting your mind off doesn't make it go away. It doesn't disprove it just because you don't want to think about it. And number 4, if he descends to the sky, basically falls towards the sky, he would have to be small enough to fit in the sky. How many people subconsciously imagine something coming down while there is a vast sky around it? How many people, how many Wahhabis, subconsciously imagine something, yani they imagine God, coming down while there is a vast sky around him? Because they don't understand that Allah is not like his creations. They don't know what that means. So they would imagine that God is in the sky, surrounded by vast sky, all around him like a hovering or flying being, like Superman or like an angel. So after these arguments here given to this Wahhabi, and there's more. If he descends to the sky, he'd be crowded by angels, because the sky is so packed with angels that there's not even enough empty space for 4 fingers. Wahhabi's probably not going to be imagining that when he imagines God coming down to the sky. And he might say, no, we don't imagine God coming down to the sky, but the fact of the matter is that things rush to the imagination. Like if I say to you right now, big red apple, then you're not going to be able to not imagine a big red apple. So when somebody says to him, God descends down to the lowest sky during the last third of the night, he's going to imagine something descending during the last third of the night. And if he doesn't know about the hadith about the sky being crowded with angels, then he would imagine that Allah is in this sky that he can see above him. Just he doesn't see Allah, but he knows the sky. The sky is familiar to him, and he imagines someone who comes down, some being who comes down to the sky. But according to a hadith, there's not even a 4-fingered space distance empty in the sky. The sky is so packed with angels that there's not even enough empty space for 4 fingers. So then Allah would be crowded by angels. And if he descends during the last part of the night, then after a few moments, it will be the last third of the night somewhere else. And then again somewhere else. It is always the last third of the night somewhere. Just as when it is dawn or noon in one land, it will shortly become dawn or noon in the neighboring land. So according to that, Allah is relentlessly going up and down, up and down, up and down. Because he has to go up so that he can descend. Like, it's not going to be just the case that, all right, he descended down to the lowest sky during the last third of the night somewhere, wherever it was the last third of the night. And then when it became the last third of the night in the neighboring land, all he did was move over, because then he wouldn't have descended. According to the Wahhabi, he didn't just move over. So what did he do? He came down. So in order for him to come down means he has to go back up. So he came down during the last third of the night. Then it's going to be the last third of the night in another land. So he's going to have to go up so he can come back down instead of just moving over. So then Allah is like a yo-yo, or he's like the sun all over the earth, which is silly, going up and down. So then the Wahhabi says, this is where we are starting today. Is it even permissible to think about Allah like this? I think this is philosophy. So that goes back to the statement. The Sunni tried to cut that off already, but he came back anyway. He told him, just shutting your mind off from this here. Just shutting your mind off from that doesn't save you from it or disprove it. Just because you don't want to think about it. But that Wahhabi, he said this statement anyway. Is it even permissible to think about Allah like this? So that statement of the Sunni didn't register for him. That's why you don't want to talk a lot. Because the more you talk, the more you're going to increase the chances for something to go right in one ear and come out the other ear. He says, I think this is philosophy. So the Sunni tells him, this is not philosophy. It is plain regular thinking about the meaning and implication of a statement. You said something, so you don't want to follow through though. What is not permissible is to shut your mind off on purpose. So that's his repeating himself. To intentionally ignore the implications of your statements and beliefs. This is a fact and not philosophy. So that's just like the Christians, for example. They said God the Father, God the Son. So you say to him, so you're saying God is his own father and his own son? He will say, we are merely humans. We cannot conceive this. This is a fact and it's not philosophy. If there were two people who believed that Allah himself descends to the lowest sky during the last third of the night, but they were both on different sides of the earth. So one of them, for example, he's in Australia. And one of them, he's in United States. So in his last third of the night, in one place, it's daytime in the other place. But they have the same belief that God descends to the lowest sky during the last third of the night. Then for the one who is actually in the last third of the night, he imagines that Allah has come down. And for the other one, the one who's in the daytime, he imagines that Allah is still up, above, and that it's not yet time for him to descend, because Wahhabi doesn't think that far. This is along with the fact that probably neither of them has realized that he imagined something about the unimaginable self of Allah. So the Wahhabi says, but isn't this applying the intellect to what Allah says? Aren't we obligated to believe what Allah informs us without trying to rationalize it? That's Wahhabi creed. This is where Wahhabis and Christians are similar. So Wahhabis and Christians, they are similar in some ways, and Wahhabis and Jews are similar in some ways. The Wahhabis and Christians are similar in their blatant defiance of intellect. They will both tell you right to your face, you are just a human being trying to use your mind. Now, a Jew, I don't know, they don't usually try to give dawah, so they might not go into these arguments. But what's the similarity between Wahhabi and Jew? Wahhabi and Jew is that they're both sneaky, very dishonest. So the Sunni says, absolutely not. There is no evidence from the book of Allah that forbids the slaves from thinking rationally. To the contrary, Allah commands it. He commands thinking rationally. When he says in Surah Al-Hashr, Ayah 2, فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ, think, yani consider, ponder, yani reflect, فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ, oh you who have vision, meaning intelligence. Here, this vision, this is the heart's vision. Al-absar is the heart's vision, not the eye's vision here. This is the intelligence. And Allah dispraised those who did not use their minds when he repeatedly says throughout the Quran, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, do you not use your minds, or do you not think? And when he says in Surah Al-Mulk, Ayah 10, وَقَالُوا لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ أَوْ نَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ, and they will say, had only we listened or used our minds, we would not be inmates of the inferno. If our only choice is to believe in the Quran and the Sunnah without any mental or rational evidence, then how would we be able to talk to people who do not believe in the Quran and the Sunnah in the first place? So that's like Christian. If you say to the Christian, you can't prove Trinity, he would say, yeah, it says in the Bible. You tell him the Bible's not proof. He'll say, well, how am I supposed to prove the Trinity then? So that's how Wahhabi is. So we say to him, if we could not use our minds, if we didn't have any rational evidence or any mental rational arguments, then how would we be able to talk to people who do not believe in the Quran and the Sunnah in the first place? It doesn't cross Christians' mind that you don't even believe in the Bible. So why he presents it to you as indisputable fact, that's fallacious in the first place. You can't be surprised that those people are stuck the way they are. When you talk to people, this is important here, when you have a discussion, when you have a debate with someone, don't let him impose on you what's not proof according to you. Just like he will not let you impose on him what's not proof according to him. Now that other person, not you guided Sunni Muslim who thinks right, he's not going to do like that. He's going to tell you, that Quran of yours is not proof for me, but the Bible says, so it has a double standard. You're not going to have the double standard, so just give him rational arguments right from the beginning. Tell him, in the first place, you don't accept the Quran. Well, I'm going to give you the ayah of the Quran as an evidence. So we have something in common. We have minds. Let's talk rationally. And some Christians are accustomed to this, Christians who have experience with Muslims. I remember, it's the only time this happened. One Christian man, they used to call him Brother Edward was his name. That was his name in the community, in the neighborhood. Brother Edward. So this one, he used to go every Sunday with loud horn and just say his blasphemy. You know how they do, even nobody's listening to them. So I went to him one time. So he knows I'm a Muslim. So then what he did, he did talk to me, but he closed his Bible. He knows it's not going to, there's no point in him reciting verses from the Bible for me. But most of the time, they're not going to do like that. And here, while I'm on this point for you, a Wahhabi is going to tell you, Ibn Taymiyyah said, Ibn Uthaymeen said, Al-Albani said. Don't let him get away with that. Tell him those ones are not reliable. They are deviants. So he might say, oh, who are you to say that? But here's the point. Not say who am I. Point is, your real point is, why don't you bring me a reference, a scholar that we don't disagree about? If I tell you Sheikh Abdullah said, you won't accept. If I tell you Al-Ghumari said, you won't accept. If I tell you Al-Kawthari said, you won't accept. So I'm going to accept for you to tell me Ibn Taymiyyah said. Tell me what Ash-Shafi'i said. For example, he's one we don't disagree about. Tell me what At-Tahawi said. So that's important for you. When you talk to someone, when you debate with someone, don't let him impose on you something that's not a proof according to you. Just like he won't let you impose on him what's not a proof according to him. So, if our only choice is to believe in the Quran and the Sunnah without any mental or rational evidence, then how would we be able to talk to people who do not believe in the Quran and the Sunnah in the first place? The way to talk to them is to make sense to them. Yani, to say something sensible to them. You talk to them like a human being. And what then would make us different from the Christians who say, don't ask, just believe? Isn't it famous about the Muslims that they have, now I'm going to take out the word logical here, we're going to say rational. That's what one of the sheikhs advised me, not to use the word logical. And I accept his advice here. Because this word logical has some philosophical implications originally. But people use it nowadays like it just means rational. So we're just going to say rational. Isn't it famous about the Muslims that they have rational arguments against the Christians claim of a Trinity, and that Jesus is God or the Son of God? Yeah. Likewise, we have rational arguments against those who believe that Allah is a body in the sky, even if they claim to be Muslims. Don't you realize that your question implies that the companions believed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam without any evidence that he was telling the truth? Despite that their families and communities waged war on them and boycotted them and disowned them. Don't you know how hard that is? When someone is a new Muslim and his family or his community is waging war on him, yani is boycotting him, disowning him, gossiping about him, everything, looking at him funny. Do you think that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling them to pray and fast and give charity and be good to others was enough to convince them to bear all of that hardship? And that they were astonished by the idea of God being in the sky? You think they were impressed by the idea of God being in the sky? No. It was because they rationally understood the truth that the Creator is not like anything. He is not a shape or form or a color, and He exists without time and without place and without direction. This is the astonishing creed. This is the astonishing creed that appeals to the sound mind. That when you tell that to someone that God exists without a shape, without a form, without a color, and He exists without a place, and He exists without a direction, and when you wipe his imagination away and his mind is still functioning, that's when the person says, whoa, like, you know, the emoji whose head is exploding. Whoa, that's profound. That God exists without a shape or form or color, and He exists without time or place. Not that He's in the sky. That's not profound. This is the astonishing creed that appeals to the sound mind. So the Wahhabi says, but they had evidence. The Quran itself. Don't you believe that the Quran was Muhammad's greatest miracle? So the Sunni says, yes, it was his greatest miracle. However, if its explanation is strictly literal, as those who call themselves Salafis suggest, then the Arabs would have been able to discredit the Quran as a miracle. Because there would be contradictions if everything is literal. The only way that the Quran doesn't have contradictions is if some spots are not taken literally. That's a fact. And there's rules for that. So don't forget, there's some things when we say when some things are not taken literally, that means though that the language accepts. The language accepts these meanings, not that you just give it any meaning you want. Again, what would the Christians do, for example? Like when it comes to the verse in the Bible, in the chapter of Jeremiah, that says, no one is like you, O Lord. And that's after they said in the other verse in Genesis that God made man in His likeness. So how are they going to explain this? So they're going to keep the part that says God made man in His likeness. That part's that they want that part because they want to say God is like something. So what they're going to do, the other one that nothing is like God, they're going to give you all sorts of spins, all kinds of ways. Each one, he's going to come up with his own explanation. Although none of their explanations actually work for the language. Like, in other words, if someone says, well, nothing is like God means the idols are not like God in particular. So why it says nothing then? Doesn't nothing include more than the idols? So this explanation doesn't fit the language. When it says no one is like God, then you can't just restrict that to the idols. So that's an example of what a Christian would do. This example of the Bible verses is not here in this book. But what we're saying here is, yes, the Sunni says, yes, the Quran was his greatest miracle. That's true. But the way of the so-called Salafi is to deny alternative interpretation. So if there's no alternative interpretation and everything is literal, then those old Arabs would have been able to discredit the Quran as a miracle. If the Quran were strictly literal, every verse of the Quran were to be taken literally, then the Arabs would have been able to discredit the Quran as a miracle. And then the Sahaba wouldn't really have any proof, because there would be contradictions if everything is literal. They would have been able to argue with the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims just as I'm arguing with you now. The Sunni saying to the Wahhabi, if what the companions were doing is like what you're doing, then the pagans would have been able to argue with them like I'm arguing with you, and then their answer would have been like your answer is, which is, we're not supposed to use our minds. So you think that's a fine answer? When you put it that way, you see how horrible of an answer that is. They would have been able to say, hey Muhammad, what kind of miracle is this? Is your God in the sky or over the sky? Or is he in the earth? Or is he surrounding everything? Is he closer when I prostrate? Or is he closer to my jugular vein? Is he with me wherever I am? Or is he only with the God-fearing? So what's the answer going to be? What's Wahhabi going to say? Some Wahhabis will say, all of it. Those are the exceptionally dumb ones. However, the old Arabs understood the pure, eloquent Arabic, and they understood how to interpret the different expressions. They knew that certain expressions are not taken by their literal meanings, as they did in their poetry and their orations, when they would talk and deliver speeches. For example, the Arabs would say, Al-Laylat al-Hilal. Literally, this means the crescent is tonight. However, they understood that there is an omitted mudaf. So that's a payoff right there. We talked about that. And that it really means the appearance of the crescent is tonight. So they understand that without you saying it. If taken literally, it means that the crescent is the actual night. And likewise, the Arabs used to say, Al-Wardu Ayyar. This literally means the rose is May. And it really means the appearance of the rose is in the month of May. So they knew how to understand implications. And they knew how to address alternative interpretations. That's why they didn't argue with the Sahaba like I'm arguing with you now, Wahhabi. Because they understood the language. Also, the poet said in praying for his beloved's home, and her name was May, he said, ألا يسلمي يا دار مي على البلا ولا زال منهلا بجرعائك القطر. O house of May, be sound from decrepitude, and may the rain never cease to drip upon your barren sands. If we understand Arabic as those who call themselves Salafis, this would be a supplication that the rain never stops falling on her family's land, because that's what he said in a literal sense. وَلَا زَالَ مُنْهَلًّا الْقَطْرُ. May the raindrops never stop falling. However, it is only a supplication for prosperity and long life for her family. That's the real meaning. It doesn't mean may you have continual rain 24/7, 365 days a year. It's a supplication for prosperity and long life. So it has alternative interpretation. So had the Quran and the Sunnah been explained as those who call themselves Salafis explained them, the companions actually would not have had any real evidence. They would have only been able to say as those who call themselves Salafis say, we believe in it without rationalizing it, which is the same thing the Christians say. They say, Don't ask, just believe. And this is not the way of the Salaf. So the Wahhabi says, I'll have to look into these proofs you gave, but I still have a few questions. So he's asking, okay. He says, I am told that you deny Allah's attributes. What do you say about Allah's hands? So the Sunni says, firstly, it is untrue that I or the Muslims at large deny the attributes of Allah. Secondly, it is obligatory to believe that Allah is attributed with yad, but it is not appropriate to translate it as hand, because yad has many meanings, and so does hand, but not all of their meanings match, so they are not truly equivalent to each other. They're not really matches. The word hand is not really a match for the word yad. The same is the case for wajh versus face. Each one has numerous meanings, but they don't all match. And ayn versus eye. These Arabic words as attributes of Allah should not be translated. And the fact that I do not translate them does not mean that I deny them. If you mean that I must take them literally, or else I have denied them, then after what you have heard about the hadith of the slave girl, and the ayat of istiwa, and the hadith of nuzul, you should get the picture that these things have proper explanations. If he doesn't get the picture, then that shows you how dense he is. So the Wahhabi says, so what does yad mean then? And seems like he's not being very aggressive here. Maybe he was more aggressive previously. But the way he's talking here seems more passive. Because he says, first of all, he says, I'll have to look into these proofs you gave. So that means he doesn't have an answer for them, and he's not denying them. And as if then they mean, if they are true, then he's going to have to adjust himself. If he has a mistake here, which looks like he does. He says, but I still have a few questions. So he wants to ask, and he's not apparently arguing. Or he is, like undercover arguing, but not offensively. Maybe doesn't realize it, or maybe he's not arguing, he's just asking. He said, I have a few more questions I'd like to ask you. Okay. Maybe you'll benefit. He says, I am told that you deny Allah's attributes. So this question means, I'm not confirming that though. This is what I was told. What do you say about Allah's hands? He asks. So now he wants to see if what he was told is verified or not. And so many people don't verify. How many people, they said, for example, oh, that place, I heard about that place. I don't go there. I heard that it's not a good place to go. And they never step foot in that place. A place that teaches the right religion. They never step foot in there. They never asked someone from there so that they can hear it, as they say, from the horse's mouth. So the Wahhabi says, so what does yad mean? The Sunni says, again, you have the option of not delving into the meaning, because that's what he told them about istiwa. And that is safest. And that is the general way of the Salaf. They said, yad is an attribute of Allah, and He knows what it means. And they didn't go further. You have this option, and that's safest. But Wahhabi doesn't like really to go by this way. He insists that you translate. If you don't translate, then you're a denier. The Sunni says to him, if you want to specify a meaning for it, then it depends on the context. And there's not one word you're going to use to translate that attribute for in all cases. For example, this ayah in Surah Al-Fatih, ayah 10, Yadullahi fawqa aydihim. It does not mean the hand of Allah is over their hands. It means that their allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a commitment to Allah. So it has alternative interpretation, one that agrees with the language. It is not necessary to find a way to squeeze the word hand into the translation because of the word yad. That's what Wahhabi would do. You don't have to squeeze the word hand in there because the word yad is in there. And that's even what some Sunnis would do, but they don't believe that Allah has an organ. They don't believe Allah has an organ, but they would still, as if they feel that they need to be able to, they feel that they need to squeeze the word hand in there. What is important is conveying the proper meaning. Conveying the proper meaning. Also, the hadith narrated by At-Tirmidhi and Al-Hakim, Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah. It does not mean the hand of Allah is with the group. It means the support of Allah is with Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Thus, there is no single way to translate it. It needs to be explained properly. So the Wahhabi says, but how do you explain that Allah created Adam with his two hands? Doesn't saying that they are two hands show that they are real literal hands? So the Sunni says to him, the ayah in Surah Sad, ayah 75, قال يا إبليس ما منعك أن تسجد لما خلقت بيدي. It does not mean that Allah has two body parts. So what did this Sunni do here? The Wahhabi's question is, but how do you explain that Allah created Adam with his two hands? Doesn't saying that they are two hands show that they are real literal hands? So when he says real literal hands means body parts. So then the Sunni, he stated outwardly what the Wahhabi's statement hides. So he says, this ayah doesn't mean that Allah has two body parts. Why would he do that? He's doing that to bring out the fallacy. Because Wahhabi has a fallacy. He has a camouflage. The Wahhabi has a camouflage. So he doesn't want that camouflage to be removed. That's why some scholars said, the secret of the matter is that those who take the secret of the matter is that the literalists truly believe in comparing Allah to the creations. However, they use trickery. So the Wahhabi says, did I say that Allah has body parts? Don't put words in my mouth. The Sunni says, you did not blatantly say body parts, but you said everything else that means that. Avoiding the actual word does not mean that you aren't confirming it. Not saying the word is only the way to play with the words. Yani is merely, let's say merely. Not saying the word is merely the way to play with the words. This is why the scholars said about the literalists that the secret of their matter is that they truly believe in likening Allah to the creations, but they use trickery. So I got ahead of myself. So the Wahhabi said, well, everyone who knows even some basic Arabic knows that the dual form of the word means two and not one or three. Surely you don't claim that it means that Allah has two powers, do you? Subhanallah. Now, that's an argument of Wahhabis. And on the other hand, they will argue the opposite of this sometimes. Because Wahhabis say, I don't know if it's coming, but I'm going to say it right now. Wahhabis say Allah has two eyes. And they insist on the word two. So if you told them there's no ayah from the Quran that says that, and there's no hadith that says that, they say, yes, it's in the Quran. Allah says, Tajri bi a'yunina, sailing, the Ark of Noah was sailing by our eyes. Thing is, English doesn't have a dual form. So it's just going to translate it. English has singular and plural in English includes two. Arabic has singular, dual, and plural. Singular is one, dual is two, plural is three or more. English has singular and plural. Singular is one and plural is two or more. So the Wahhabi is going to say Allah has two eyes. Then you tell them there's no ayah like that, there's no hadith like that. They'll say, indeed, Allah says, for example, Tajri bi a'yunina, sailing by our eyes. Then if you told them, but ayun is plural. Plural in Arabic is three or more. Then he's going to argue with you why this plural form means two. But here, when it comes to yet, he's going to argue with you why this dual form means nothing more than two. So he's going to say, everyone who knows even some basic Arabic knows that the dual form of the word means two, not one or three. Surely you don't claim that it means that Allah has two powers, do you? He said, can you explain the dual form a bit? Well, what confuses you here? Let me ask you, what does dual mean to you? The word dual. Two, right. Okay. So Arabic has do you know what singular form means? Okay. No, not you, the one who's asking. Yeah, one, singular. One, yes. So Arabic has a singular form. That means one thing. You say, for example, qalam, pen. Rajul, man. Arabic has dual forms. So you say qalaman, two pens. Rajulan, two men. And Arabic has plural form. So you say aqlam, pens. That means three or more. Rijal, men. That means three or more. But English doesn't have a dual form. Doesn't have a form for two only. Except the word both. Except the word both. Yeah. Yeah. A pair means two. Yeah. Although that's not a form though. It's not a form. You need the actual word there. You say both men. So it means two of them. But Arabic has a form. So you say rajul. That's man. Then you say rajulan. That means two men. You don't have to bring the Arabic word ithnan, two. You don't have to say two, the number two. There's a form for it. In English, you have plural form. Like you add s. So you say chair. That's one. You say chairs. That's two or more in English. There's no dual form. There's no form dedicated for two. But Arabic has a form dedicated for two. That's clear? So the Sunni says to him, the dual form in Arabic does not always refer to two. Just as the plural doesn't always refer to three or more. And just as the past tense form of a verb does not always refer to a past time. And the feminine form of a word does not always mean that the named one is a literal female. It takes more than some basic knowledge of Arabic to explain the Quran. So what did the Sunni do here? Here he opened the door. You usually don't want to open a door. Opening a door means you're expanding the topic. Don't expand the topic. Here he did, though, for a benefit that he hopes to achieve. Sometimes you think you're going to achieve a benefit, it's going to backfire on you, even if you're experienced. Even experienced debater, for example, he's going to think that if I go this way, it will help, and then backfires on him. It makes it worse. They're talking here about dual form versus singular form and plural form. Okay. Ideally, you want to stay there. Don't open it wider. But he opened it. The Sunni opened it wider. He said the dual form in Arabic does not only refer to two, just as the plural doesn't always refer to three or more. Okay. He stuck there to the topic. He didn't open it wider. But then he said, and just as the past tense form of a verb does not always refer to a past time, and the feminine form of a word does not always mean that the named one is a literal female. This here, opening the issue wider, avoid that. Unless you want to take a chance for benefit you see. We'll see if this Sunni didn't make it harder on himself here. It takes more than some basic knowledge of Arabic to explain the Quran. Here, what did he do? He talked about verb, the past tense verb versus present tense verb, or another type of verb. And he talked about feminine form of a word versus masculine form of a word. So he expanded the issue here. Because why you don't want to do that? Because you don't, especially when you're dealing with a Wahhabi, you don't want to give him more to cling on to, more to bounce around. Wahhabi is like a slippery fish. So you want to keep a firm grip on him. You don't want to let him get out of your hands. So the Wahhabi says, like what? So the Sunni says, an easy example is the dhikr of Hajj called Talbiyah. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. The word lab literally means ta', obedience. But labbaik does not mean you're only two obediences. Oh Allah, you're two obediences. That's not what it means, although that's dual form. It means I obey you time and again, oh Allah. So it's dual form, but has alternative interpretation though. The dual form was used for a figure of speech. Also, the ayah in the beginning of Surah Al-Mulk, ثُمَّ رُجِعِ الْبَصَرَ كَرَّتَيْنِ. It does not mean look only twice. It means regardless of how much you look, you will never find imperfection in the creation of Allah. So karratain, that's dual form. But two times is not in particular what's meant. As for the plural not referring to three or more, don't you see that Allah refers to himself as nahnu, we, while he is one? As for the past tense verb not referring to the past, Allah said about Judgment Day in Surah An-Nahl ayah 1, Ata amrullah, which literally means the command of Allah, meaning Judgment Day, came, but it has yet to come. So it really means it is on the verge of happening in the future. It's like in the Iqamah, don't you say, قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ. Qamat, that's past tense verb. When you say قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ, means the prayer started. قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ, the prayer started. That's past tense verb. But you didn't start yet. You're still making the Iqamah. So the real meaning is the prayer is about to start. As for femininity in a male's name, take the example of Talha. Don't you know it has ta' marbuta, which is originally used for femininity? So would you say that Allah has more than one because he called himself Nahnu? Would you say the Judgment Day already came because the past tense verb was used? Would you say that Talha is a woman because his name has ta' marbuta? Like you are insisting that Allah has two hands because you found it in the dual form, or because you found the dual form. This is why some scholars said that the people who liken Allah to the creations do not become scholars of the Arabic language. Their basic mistake is due to their inability to understand the language in the first place. So now this is going to go on for a little bit longer, talking about yet. So let's stop here. The Wahhabi is going to ask him next. So how do you explain the ayah about the creation of Adam? So inshallah we can start from here next time. Do you have any question I can answer for you? Question: is it valid to say Allah is attributed with a wajh, or should we say Allah is attributed with wajh without the article a? Saying it without the particle maybe is clearer. Saying it with the particle maybe is potentially confusing. It's a good question. I don't know what's the judgment of using the article. Yani you can say in Arabic, lillahi wajhun. So if you translated that, it would come out as Allah has a wajh. Or one might say Allah has wajh. It still works, it seems, to say Allah has wajh without using the particle a. Just like you'd say lillahi qudratun, Allah has power. Lillahi ilmun, Allah has knowledge. Maybe without that particle is clearer. I mean, he says, is it better just to say Allah has the attribute of wajh? Maybe, but maybe the word attribute is understood without using the word attribute. Just like you could say Allah has power. You don't have to say the attribute of power, but you could. Allah has knowledge. Allah has life. You don't have to say the attribute of, but you could. You know, let a person speak clearly, and let a person keep in mind his audience.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Okay, you give all these examples to the Wahhabi, and they just constantly keep give you an instance with me one time. Constantly keep denying, even though you keep giving them the same proof over and over and over, and get to hollering. Then he said, well, them scholars, what do you say? Them scholars are fallible too. Why you keep talking about them scholars? Like, Imam Shafi, why you keep talking about him? Why should I listen to him? But he said that if he make a mistake, don't go with that. Some more crazy thing the dude said. What should I want to do when it happens?
Well, if he still has hope that this person would understand, what I want to say is, first of all, let him assess if he thinks he's going to get anywhere with this person. Sometimes people keep talking without even thinking if he's going to get anywhere with the person he's talking to. What did Allah say? فَذَكِّرْ إِن نَفَعَتِ الذِّكْرَى. Remind, if the reminder benefits. Not just remind in only, but remind if it benefits. So who wants to talk to the brick wall? Who wants to beat a dead horse? Some people, it's like they like talking to brick walls and beating dead horses. Assess your situation. Do you think that you're going to get anywhere with this guy in the first place? So if the answer is no, then you probably want to spare yourself and leave him in his confusion. Did you do your best? Did you say it as clearly as you could? If you think you said it as clearly as you could have, maybe you've even repeated yourself already, then what you going to do? I advise a person to keep the value of his time in mind. Time is very valuable. Subhanallah wa bihamdih. So you might stop the discussion there.
So what I did do to stop the conversation, let me know if I was wrong or not, or right. I I said, let's do this. Repeat after me, and just take a shahada, so you can make sure that you are leaving this conversation that you are Muslim. Repeat after me, took a shahada, and we left like that. And I said, go ahead, man, do your thing, and kept on.
Okay, that works as long as he wasn't confirming kufr.
He did confirm kufr in our conversation.
Then he has to also reject the kufr. So when he says the shahada means, repeat after me, rejecting all blasphemy. I already told you what's blasphemy. Now repeat after me, rejecting all blasphemy, like I told you. And then if he does it, then that's good. Good idea.
But I didn't do that part. I didn't say reject all the blasphemy. I just said repeat after me. And
yeah, because sometimes a person says the shahada while he holds the blasphemy, though.
Uh-huh.
So then saying the shahada is not going to benefit him.
Okay.